Mayor, thanks so much for doing this. We so appreciate it. You have much more important things to be doing, so it's a gift to us that you've taken some time from your busy day.
Yeah, no problem.
Mayor Lightfoot, I'm really fascinated to know how this all unfolded from your vantage point. Do you remember the moment when you first realized that COVID-19 was going to be an issue for the city of Chicago?
Well, it definitely struck me as I started to see the spread of COVID outside of China and
Hmm.
start moving its way through Asia, and then when it started to hit Europe, I knew that we had to be ready. Now, luckily, we have a great public health team, and they started tracking this virus back in December,
Hmm. Oh,
and we started. Well, they have it. So it's interesting. They have a service called Blue Dot, and Blue Dot primarily tracks um, viruses around the world, and then tracks transportation, air travel, and then notifies cities that contract with the service. Hey, there's something going on in this part of the world. People are taking flights. It may hit your city.
hmm.
So our public health department has been engaged with them for quite a long time. And I'll fast forward and come back to your question. What we've then done with Blue Dot is been able to measure compliance with the stay-at-home order. So one of the other things that Blue Dot does is it takes aggregated information from cell phones. So anytime you open up an app and it says, allow us to track your location, and you
Yeah.
say yes. So that aggregated cell phone data, and it's anonymous. There are services that use that for a variety of different things, but Blue Dot uses that to track where you are and whether you're at home. And they cite home as wherever you stay for about 9 hours from midnight to the morning. So based upon that Blue Dot information, what we knew is in February, before the virus really hit hard here in Chicago, people were staying home about 59% of the time. And then we've tracked that data as these movement restrictions started to get imposed. And where we are right now is about 80% of the time based upon that Blue Dot information. Now, it's not foolproof, but it's another metric and tool that we're using to understand where people are, how they're moving, what parts of the city. So it's been very, very helpful. But going back to your initial question, we really started to know from a public health standpoint that something important was happening in the world based upon that tracking by Blue Dot.
How is that information presented to you? I mean, was it with alarm given kind of the stakes here? And how did you process it as you've been in the job for less than a year and boom, this is on the horizon. How did you process that?
Welcome to being mayor. There's a pandemic coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we started engaging with our public health department around this, really starting in about mid-January. And they started presenting information that they were seeing. And look, the reality is that it was still very new. It was really hard to get information out of China, and kind of still is. But then it was really difficult to get an accurate picture of what was happening. And it just felt like this slow moving tsunami was coming across the world to our shores. And so we prepare all year round. We supply and resupply our stockpile. So PPE, masks, ventilators, that's the kind of thing that we buy all year round. We don't wait, like it seems that the federal government has. So we started activating our plans to be responsive to the pandemic. And where I really started to get involved is, recall at the end of January, when on a Friday afternoon, I remember it like it was yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
the White House issued a declaration that all flights from China were going to be diverted into 7 airports across the country. Well, Chicago O'Hare was one of those airports.
Yeah. You weren't happy about that, as I recall.
Well, but here's why. Here's why. The reason is because they did that without talking to the public health experts at the federal level, we learned. They did it without really thinking about how do you operationalize this problem. Remember, if you came from Wuhan or Hubei province, mandatory 14-day quarantine, mandatory. Well, as a practical matter, what if somebody came from one of those provinces and was asymptomatic?
Right.
No, I'm good. I don't have a fever. I don't have body aches. I don't have any of the symptoms. I just want to get to my last destination. What was the power that we had locally to enforce the federal order, particularly because they didn't accompany the directive with any powers of enforcement? So there were a lot of nuts and bolts practical issues that they didn't think about. And over the course of a lot of discussion with the federal authorities, DHS, HHS, CDC, it became clear to me they didn't have a clue on how to operationalize this. We were begging them for a directive that, by the way, never came. And then what was clear, because I organized a call with LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, DC, we were hearing different things from the same person. So I might talk to HHS, Eric Garcetti, LA, might talk to HHS, London Breed might talk to HHS, Jenny Durkin might, and we would all get different information from the same person. And then going across those federal agencies, it was a mishmash of conflicting and different information. And that really brought home to me, we're gonna have to get this for ourselves here in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the sort of super friends of the super friend team of mayors, like this idea that you guys, I mean, really, it's become a state level pandemic response effectively, right? So they're the governors who I'm sure are all talking to each other. And then there are the mayors who are really ground zero because the cities are getting hit and particularly hard just because of the density of population. Can you give me a peek behind the curtain in terms of what that communication was like with your fellow mayors of large American cities?
Well, it's evolved over time, of course, but early on it was kind of like, holy smokes. And we used—
I don't think you said smokes. Yeah, you used different words. You're in Chicago. I know.
We basically thought this is a total shit show. We're getting conflicting information and no real guidance. And we can't wait for the federal government because this is on our doorsteps. Now, of course, the mayors from the West Coast, LA, San Francisco, and Seattle, they got hit, and they got hit hard, and they got hit early. Yeah. So I was in a lot of contact with them, watching this disaster unfold in their cities. Of course, offering any kind of supports that we could, but also making sure that I understood the magnitude of the challenge they were facing because I knew it was coming to Chicago. I knew it. And so we had great relationships before then, but we become even closer as a result of feeling like we had to be there for each other because we weren't getting the support that we needed from the federal government.
Are they really a support network in every sense of the word? Like, I would, of course, imagine you share best practices and offers for assistance, but I wonder if there's like a psychological and emotional support network that's developed given just the gravity of the situation.
Without a doubt. I mean, I started to get to know a lot of these mayors a year ago when I became mayor of Chicago, primarily through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but also through other mayoral work that I'm doing. I'm part of the Bloomberg Harvard class, so some of these folks I know through that. But yeah, I mean, we knew that we needed to support each other. And so, yeah, we have a lot of emotional support, certainly some rogues humor a little bit. But, you know, we've been there for each other to help each of us get through very different times. You know, this is a trite comment, but it's very true. There are very few people in your life as a mayor who know what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. All of these mayors, with the exception of London Breed, who's still relatively new, are really experienced mayors. They've been through a lot. And so I look to them for support and guidance and help. And I hope that I'm providing the same for them. I mean, we've been trading back and forth. So early on, we stood up here in Chicago, a small business resiliency fund because we knew our small businesses were being devastated. Congress is still debating and arguing about whether or not they were going to do what then became the CARES Act 3. But meanwhile, we couldn't wait. We had to do something. So we stood up a $100 million loan fund here in Chicago. And I got calls from some of my fellow mayors saying, well, how did you do it? We're interested in doing something similar. So offering those kinds of supports to each other and just being friends and being in a forum where you can, let your hair down and let your guard down, that's really very valuable and important.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I want to sort of, as we talk about communications that have made things easier, you've become a meme. You're like one of the only public officials that has become a real internet star in terms of just being a tough ass, pardon my French. There are people that are photoshopping your image to like closed Chicago landmarks and parks. When that first started happening, what did you think of it? And what do you think that reflects in Chicago?
Well, it's been something that we've had a lot of fun with. The very first one I think I saw was right after I closed down the lakefront, and I had a press conference, and I was pretty angry. People just weren't taking it seriously. I have cameras, feeds all over the city in my office, and I was watching the lakefront. And I was seeing people walking their dog, people having a little picnic, doing yoga, jogging. But all in a very tight, confined space. And I just thought to myself, dear Lord, what is wrong with these people? Why don't they understand that they are putting themselves at risk? So I started out saying, okay, this is not a thing. This can't be. You have to stop. You have to understand the risk. You got to social distance. And then I had this press conference and made this very plaintive plea. I came back in my office, and the crowds were even thicker than they had been before I had the press conference. I thought, okay, all right, I know what to do about this. I'm going to shut down the lakefront. And we had this conversation with some folks outside of city government. One of our other government partners are like, whatever, that's a big deal. Like, no, in Chicago, it's a big deal. And
it's a big deal.
But people have been compliant. Now, initially, they're like, all right, the mayor's watching. We're going to be off the lakefront, and we can't go in these adjacent parks. But then we're just going to move inland and do the same thing. I'm like, no, that is not going to be a thing that happens either. So we've been very diligent. But the memes I like the memes. I think they're pretty funny. We've done our own, things around social distancing. We did another series around staying at home and doing the census, because that's the census.
Sure.
Also very important.
But you've also been driving around the city of Chicago and yelling at people. It's like a scene out of I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. This is like a hands-on mayoralty that I have not seen in a major American city.
Well, I wouldn't say yelling. I would say...
Okay, heckling? What would you...
Advice about social distancing.
How did that idea come to you to just be like, was it just born out of frustration? Like, this is not a thing, Chicago. We are not doing this. Like, how did that hatch, that idea?
I started getting a lot of emails about a particular area of the city where people felt like they weren't doing social distancing. And we were starting to see a fairly significant uptick in the number of COVID positive cases. So one night I said to my detail, hey, let's go up. And it was a far north side. And, as I drove up Lakeshore Drive, I saw what was happening around the Lincoln Park Zoo. I got on the phone, I called my chief of staff. I said, you need to call the commander of this district, get them out there, get the bike teams there, make sure they're doing dispersals. And then as we got into this neighborhood, which is a fascinating neighborhood in the city, it's literally from east to west, It's got folks from South Asia, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all kind of the South Asian countries. And then as you drive further west, it becomes a primarily Orthodox Jewish community. And as I was driving, I saw these clusters, mostly men, kind of hanging out, having a cig, but like on top of each other. And so I rolled down the window and I'm like, guys, hey. And they looked and they're like, wait, is that the mayor? And they're like, hi, Mayor. I'm like, hi, can you go home now? I don't want to have to issue your ticket. Can you please social distance? And so yeah, and then at one point we were driving a little further west, and we drove by, it was a very warm night. We drove by this garage, and the door was up, and there were a bunch of young people sitting around, and it was clear they were having like a drinking party.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove by, and I saw it, and I'm like, I said, back up, let's go back. So we backed up, and I'm laughing just thinking about it. And I rolled down the window. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? You're too close. You gotta break it up. And I heard this young woman say, oh shit.
They were like, not only is it an adult figure, it's the mayor. Do you feel like, I mean, what surprised you about the city? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of positive things to say about the city of Chicago. It's an incredible city. Even if I was born in Washington, D.C. and live in New York, I can appreciate its values. My husband is from there. But I want to know, in this moment of crisis, what has surprised you about the population of your town?
Well, I won't really say that it surprised me, but the level of outpouring and care for total strangers has been amazing. I mean, I could cite you countless examples. Of course, people are paid to do it. The healthcare workers have been phenomenal. I have a friend who is a nurse at Rush, and on Easter Sunday, she posted this video, and it made me weep. The level of care and concern, also exhaustion, both physically and mentally. But these people they're stepping up, and they're going back every single day into a really emotionally and physically and risky circumstance because they care about delivering high quality care. And I have countless stories of policemen and firemen and EMTs really being there for people, but also kids. I mean, kids are just, they are understanding the moment, probably, hopefully not with full magnitude of how serious it is, but I'm getting handwritten notes in marker. A boy a couple blocks away from me delivered a note to my house, and it was really nice and lovely. But you're seeing a girl learning how to sew so she can make masks and distribute them. I was up at Wrigley Field, and this time of year baseball would be in full view, but one of the pantries in the area ran out of space because they're seeing a need that's 3 to 4 times the amount that they normally have. And the Ricketts family, the owners of the Cubs, said, hey, we're not playing baseball, come and we'll help you. So literally these long concourses and runways are the perfect location for social distancing and putting together assembly lines to package food. And these are, normal folks who have time and are out there in the cold. It's still unfortunately cold here in Chicago, outside at Wrigley, packaging food for strangers. And I mean, it's just stuff like that is going on every single day. I mean, the amount of things that we've seen in our rapid response racial equity team, and how we've been going deep into neighborhoods and really working with community stakeholders. I mean, the stories just feed your soul. And what it tells me, I knew it, but it really reinforces this is an amazing place with amazing people who are stepping up in this incredible time of need. It doesn't matter how old they are, how young, how old, everything in between. People in the city are all in for their neighbors. And that is one of the most remarkable stories that's coming out of this otherwise very difficult time.
I wonder how you yourself are dealing with this time. I mean, you talk about the resilience and the exhaustion. How much are you sleeping at night? I mean, what is your day like? How much do you see your child?
It's tough. I mean, there's no question it's tough. I'm moving from meeting to meeting, really trying to make sure that I have my hands on where we are on a moment by moment with bending the curve, and we're flattening the curve. We haven't quite bent it yet. Which is all good stuff, but I'm anxious to see the number of cases start to go down. I carry that weight with me. Every time I get the daily report about the number of deaths, it's devastating. And I'm starting to personally know people, not only who are sick, but who are dying. And that's really hard. When I go home at night, I'm utterly spent. I walk in and I put hand sanitizer on because that's what we're doing right now. If I can pull my daughter from her games of Fortnite or something else that she's doing with her family, but we make sure that we have family time. And my wife and I just sit and we talk about what's happened over the course of the day. But I have to have some kind of headspace for myself. I try to take it as much as I can during the course of the day. I'm a planner and a thinker, and so I need to have that time where I'm not just being somebody's demanding something of me that moment. That's hard. It's hard to get in this time because there's just so much going on and so many decisions that need to be made. I'm not a micromanager, but I want to make sure I understand what's happening and that I can offer my guidance. But it's also important for me to know as a leader as much as I can. So we have, as you would imagine, a regular cadence of meetings and calls to make sure that happens. And I can weigh in and give my steer on things that are important. But it's exhausting. I mean, it is nonstop. I think this is day 40 something. There are days where I wake up, I have to look at my phone and think, what day is this? And I kind of have a calendar in my head. I know the days of the week. I can remember from week to week things that happen. I've lost all sense of that now.
Yeah.
It feels a lot in some instances like Groundhog Day. But what I also feel is there's light at the end of the tunnel. It was a pinprick a couple of weeks ago. It's getting the aperture is expanding, but we still have a long way to go. And I'm hopeful by nature. I'm optimistic about what our recovery will look like. But I also know that we have a lot that we really have to think about, not just about opening up businesses. That's easy in some ways, but it's really challenging. It's opening up our world to what we are now, because what we were in February is not what we are now, and it's never going to be what we are going forward. Mm-hmm. This virus and what it's done to our city, what it's done to our soul, what it's done to our infrastructure, what it's done to our economy and our neighborhoods. This is a legacy that's going to live with us for a long time. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we use this to make ourselves better, more important, more inclusive, more equitable, more stronger? And those are the kind of conversations that we are having now. And it's important, it's deep, it's fascinating, it's scary, and everything else in between.
I just want to ask you one more question. I know you have to go. I really want to focus on you for this last one. You talk about the legacy of this moment. This is going to be the defining event of your lifetime in all likelihood.
Probably so.
Hopefully, right? I mean, I hope there's not something bigger than this or more catastrophic. How are you personally grappling with this? And I guess, how has this changed you? I mean, you started out, you got sworn into office almost a year ago, and you have been handed a catastrophic, century-defining disaster. And it's, you're dealing with it every day. You know who you are. You know how you've reacted to other situations in the past. How have you changed?
Well, I have to go back and give it a little more context. I walk into office with $1 billion budget deficit. And my goal was not to raise property taxes on folks who were really hurting. We met that goal, but with the benefit of hindsight, and particularly the devastation that people are feeling, the pressure around housing, I am really glad that we took that step to avoid adding yet another thing on top of their burden. And then we had a 2-week teacher strike where our kids were out of school, and our seniors have really bore the brunt of that. It was at a time when they were applying for colleges. They couldn't get together to do testing, where they needed teacher letters that weren't coming because they weren't in contact with their teachers, where they needed the supports of counselors to help them put together their college applications. That didn't exist. And now this. So I'm not going to say that each of those prepared me for it or in my life experiences, because there's nothing like this in our lifetime. I have a 91-year-old mother. right? And I've talked to people who have been around way longer than I have. No one who's alive has experienced anything like this in our country. They just haven't. It has changed me. It's changed me in thinking a number of things. One, really grateful for the team that we put together, and particularly our public health infrastructure. I had some sense of it, but I didn't have a clear appreciation of how vital and important it is in a moment like this. And those folks have just been kicking butt every day. I am so incredibly grateful for them. I mean, I really am. I'm gonna get a little teary.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine the stories they're sharing with you. You understand the depth of their giving, if you, for lack of a better term, you know, their belief in humanity and their work to preserve it.
You know, it's changed me in thinking about the urgency around equity and inclusion. As I said before, you know, we knew that we had to do more. I ran on that. I've tried to do everything I can, not just by words, but by deeds and policy changes. We have to escalate and speed up what we're doing. The need is so dire. It is flashing every day like a neon sign. And so that has changed my thinking about how we pivot to take advantage of this opportunity, but also the daunting challenges that we face in trying to do just that. And as a person, I think I've always been a person of faith. I feel even closer to that now. I feel the need for something that gives me strength and really cleanses my soul and my mind on a regular basis. I've had a lot of great conversations with religious leaders across the city, and a number of them, and a lot with our cardinal here. I'm not Catholic, but he's a man that I really admire, and I've been looking to other people, both clergy and laity, for strength and for support. And that's really important for me, to lift me up every day. And I'm very fortunate that not only is my wife and my daughter, who makes fun of me mostly, there to really give me love and support and help me recover. I have a great group of friends who are checking in on me, and they know me as Lori, not as mayor. And yeah, I'm really, really grateful for them. So just making sure that I'm do my own check well-being for myself every day. That's really important. But my sense of urgency and determination to move seemingly intractable mountains that have left too many people by the wayside. I always had the fire in the belly. I ran on that. I've governed on it, and I'm even more fired up now.
Mayor Lightfoot, may you find the support where you need it. Please keep driving around your favorite neighborhoods in Chicago and yelling at people to socially distance. It's the best thing happening in America right now. And thank you so much for your time and everything you're doing to keep Chicago safe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.